What is going on, Babylonians? It's me, Songs of Rage, back with another Outriders worldslayer video to bring to you, and today we're doing the second gun guide in the series, and this will be on the Emerald Chaos light machine gun. Now this gun in itself is actually quite stunning, with obviously the green crystal kind of effect that is actually coming out the top of the gun, and the nice banana mag that's underneath it as well just makes it kind of an appealing gun to actually be wielding in your hands. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it down, we're going to have a look into the stats, what makes the mod so unique, and test it out on some shotguns just to be able to see how this mod actually does perform with multiple pellets. Before we get any further, make sure you have dropped a like and a subscribe on the channel, it really does help the channel out. Let's get right into it. So the first thing that we do actually need to cover is going to be the gun stats in of itself. So obviously this LMG is, as it mentions on the gun card, is a stabilizing variant. Now what this means is it starts off very inaccurate, and then the longer you hold down the trigger, the more accurate it actually starts to get. And this is like in contrast to any other kind of gun that actually does exist in worldslayer, or just Outriders in general, because the idea of this is obviously the more you actually hold down the trigger in most guns, that does mean that you get more recoil, and it becomes harder to be able to actually land those pinpoint shots. Whereas with this kind of gun, you actually do want to be able to hold the trigger down and obviously be able to actually put out a hailstorm of kind of bullets to be able to obviously kill enemies as quickly as possible. Now this one does roll with crit damage, long range damage, and status power, which interestingly enough is actually some of the perfect rolls to actually get if you're a firepower technomancer. So therefore this gun actually does kind of lean towards that kind of playstyle, and the fact that it does have a toxic mod to come with it as well, it kind of also leans into that playstyle as well. Talking about the mod, let's have a look into that. So the Noxious Spawns is the tier 3 mod that does come with this, where successful shots spawn 3 anomaly projectiles that move towards the enemy with the highest health. And while the card or the screenshots that you're going to be seeing in the background are actually from our early access, it turns out this mod has actually had a change in from going from our early access to the live build, and it actually now does 175,521 damage at level 57. And this applies toxic to enemy to the target, which obviously with the highest health. So they all go after the exact same enemy, and then any kind of enemies within a 1 meter range of that person that's been hit, and this has a 3-second cooldown. Now the reason why I kind of like this, and especially why it kind of gravitates towards a firepower technomancer, is the fact that it does have that line where it goes for the highest health enemy. Now obviously if you are shooting enemies, therefore they're not necessarily going to have the highest amount of health, unless we're actually talking kind of elites, and in which case most of the time these projectiles will help you to be able to actually chip down their health. But in most cases when you actually take on mods, kind of mob enemies, what this will do is actually go out of its way to be able to actually search for another enemy, and then it will go out and apply that toxic, and obviously because you then have that toxic pretty much ready to go, you're then able to benefit from your standard multipliers that you actually do already have in your build. Now because this doesn't actually go for the target that you're already shooting at in the most cases, that means that you're not going to have to worry about this mod actually proccing to be able to actually steal any of your bullet kind of refilling skills. Things like toxic lead, things like trick up the sleeve, and you're not going to have to worry about it with this mod. So therefore this actually does work out in a very nice way to actually replace what bone shrapnel used to be able to do, and obviously it is kind of more selective than that because it will only go after one target that actually exists on the battlefield in the first place, and it will actually do a substantial amount of damage on top of that as well. Now we did actually test this out with a shotgun just to be able to actually see how this kind of works, because this one does mention successful shots. Now in the past when we had successful shots, that means that we can actually trigger per pellet that actually does land. Things like Claymore Torrent, things like Shadow Comet are actually well known for how much they're actually able to deal out a massive amount of damage, because they're able to trigger anywhere from like 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 comets in one go if you are actually able to get lucky with that pellet spread. Now when it came to this, the most I could actually get it to trigger was 2, so therefore it's almost like it's got a soft cap built into it, which means that you can't actually summon more than 2 kind of trying to like versions of this mod to actually proc, so therefore you will only get a maximum of 6 anomaly projectiles that will then travel towards the same target and deal a massive amount of damage and apply toxic. So then this actually becomes a little bit more lethal, because we actually do have a decent amount of damage being actually flying towards a target. And interestingly enough is obviously if you are going to be playing as like a technomancer that obviously can then go into things like euthanizer and radical therapy, the first projectile will be able to apply that toxic, and every single one that's after that would then benefit from every single multiplier on it. So that's kind of what makes it a little bit more lethal. And the projectiles on top of this will also travel through walls, so it doesn't need any kind of line of sight. It doesn't have to worry about anything being in its way. It will actually find its own way to that target as well. With all this in mind, I wouldn't necessarily put Noxious Spawns on a shotgun. I don't think it actually really helps it out too much. There's definitely some better mods, definitely some of those that actually came from the vanilla version of the game before we've actually tested everything out in this game, that would actually make it a little bit more consistent and will actually be able to help out with dealing damage to the targets that you're actually currently shooting. So therefore I wouldn't necessarily use this as for an anomaly power build, but I can see this potentially getting a look in when it comes to a firepower build, and especially a firepower technomancer. So if any kind of firepower technomancer mains out there, feel free to grab this gun. It's definitely worth a look, and because it is an LMG and it does actually roll into crit damage and long range damage, most of you that actually do prefer to use the LMGs over the burst ARs, this actually could be a nice alternative, and it's actually already got that tier 3 mod already built in them. So there you have it. That pretty much wraps up everything to do with the Emerald Chaos and the Noxious Spawns tier 3 mod. I hope you've learned something useful with ourselves. Let us know in the comment section down below. What are your thoughts on this mod? What are your thoughts on this weapon? Is this something you'd actually plan to pick up? Is this something you'd actually like to be able to mess about with in some of your builds and actually test out and give it a go that way? Massive thank you to making it all the way to the end of this video. Massive thank you to the Babylonian family, as always, for their continued support. It really does mean the world. And that just leaves me to say, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, and I'll see you all on that next video.